Hello, all you fine folks out there, and welcome back to the RimWorld Restart on Depth series. My friends, I'm ever so glad to see you here once more today. Today, my friends, we start by facing the issue that we've been facing for quite a few episodes, the issue of not having near enough components and steel to build all of the tanks that our little hearts desire. So we're going to begin today by doing a lot of strip mining, which, as I'm sure you've guessed, will allow us to collect all of these resources that we require. During the time that we were strip mining, we had also finally enslaved Purr, the fella that we had taken prisoner last episode with the great crafting skill, and because of this we would also have him begin working on plenty of alloys as well as some new tools. Not only because we want him to get that crafting skill up to a 10 as soon as possible, but also because these tools will be quite useful. These are steampunk drills, and they just so happen to increase mining speed by 100%, which is pretty darn good. We let Laz here test it out, and as you can see, he was much faster than Jiraiya or Kona Yoshimaru. Now, to be fair, his skill is a little bit higher than theirs, but with the drill, he could absolutely run circles around them. Some time later, and we ended up having a transport pod crash nearby. It seems that there is a space refugee by the name of Brick. Brick here had a pretty good set of skills, and just as well, he was an undergrounder jogger, so we were interested in capturing him, but I thought that might be a little too cruel, so we decided to rescue him instead. We'll tend him back to health and let him make his own decisions, but there's not really any way off the planet that we know of, so I have a feeling he might be interested in staying here. By this point, we also had plenty of silk and ink berries, which is exactly what we needed to build our operating theater notes tables. These will help us out immensely with our successful surgery rate as well as our tint quality. Later on into the night, it would seem that our hospitality has paid off as Brick has been healed and has also decided to join us. Welcome aboard, little fella. After some time of crafting and smithing, Laz and the other miners all had these steampunk drills, meaning that our strip mining operations will be most successful. Well, not only successful, but also successful within a very quick amount of time. To further upgrade Purr's crafting skill, I also decided to let him go ahead and work on some parts for a brand new steam tank, like the boilers, the pipes, and all that great stuff. After a little bit of time, our efforts were quite successful as well, and his crafting skill was indeed now a 10, meaning that he could also make a clockwork leg for us. Once we finally had this created, we would have Laz install it on Kona Yoshimaru, who had been missing her right leg for quite some time now. Thanks to our operating theater table notes as well as our operating table itself, there was very little chance of this not going properly. Now, at some point in today's episode, I also plan on all of us doing a little bit of traveling for something special, of course, so I want to ensure that our defenses are up to par to protect the place in our absence. And thus, I have decided to build a clockwork sniper turret that is fairly slow, but also very accurate and also very deadly, covering basically the entire village. I also went to research pipe organs, basically making a large organ instrument that we could play, and it would be a cool decorative item, and it would bring people a lot of happiness, but after I ended up researching it, I realized that we don't meet the requirements. Purr, of course, has a crafting of 10, but I think he's incapable of artistic work, so we're screwed for now. You live and you learn. We'll get around to building it eventually. I don't exactly think a steampunk pipe organ fits with the culture per se in terms of a musical instrument, but I definitely think that it fits with the theme of the series and our village and colony, so there's that. But that'll be later on. As for now, we have much bigger fish to fry with a very good-sized raid from the Impid tribes nearby, and they're attacking us from 3 separate angles. A little bit concerning to say the least, even though this is simply a tribal attack. Normally we would hop into our tanks and send them all out, but our garage was filled with some allies that we didn't want to run over, making it quite hard to send them all out. Nevertheless, we would do the best with what we had and try to get them out as soon as possible. Some of the others had broke through our defenses on the other side of our entrance and were getting shot to pieces by our clockwork turrets. Truth be told, though, that was considered mercy to what their comrades on the western wall were facing, as many of their heads had been ran over and crushed by our tank treads, and their chest cavities had been burnt and caved in by a super powerful, superheated stream of steam. They had started this fight, but of course we would have to end it as they ran away with their tails tucked firmly between their legs. Now, to be fair, I say that they started the fight, but technically last episode we did use a bioweapon to turn all the animals in the area into fleshy monsters that would attack an entire base of theirs and kill many people, but I digress. One of them had a pretty decent skill set though, so instead of executing her, we decided to take her prisoner, and of course we'll eventually get her recruited with time. Now that was a fairly tense situation for everyone. I thought they could use a good bit of rest and relaxation. So I decided to upgrade our calligraphy rec shrine area here just outside our hospital with more tables as well as a nice blossom tree. And you know, I think it really made everyone much happier, even if just by a teeny tiny little bit. A little bit of time later, we had finally recruited a impid that we had taken prisoner last episode into our ranks. And if I remember correctly, she has a mighty melee skill, and that is why when she went into the warehouse to equip all the weapons, I gave her a pretty darn good sword. Now it's no Neo Katana like some of our other samurai have, but maybe we'll get her one in the future after we kill a few more of the mercenaries. As for now, she'll just have to do the best with what she has while she's helping out cook around the village. Speaking of which, we could also use a little bit of protein in our diet, so we decided to slaughter some of our cows, including a poor little calf. Sadly, I had done this before I seen some comments on the last episode where some of you guys had actually named these cows, and I'm very sorry about that. Either way though, eating this beef will make our muscles all big and strong for the upcoming battle. Oh, what upcoming battle, you might ask? Well, my friends, we're loading up everything into our steam tanks and we are going back out to conquer yet another space mercenary settlement. Because truly the only good defense against these vile bastards is a great offense. And with our current fleet of 5 steam tanks, I think we should be able to pull this off again. I will say, upon our arrival, I was once again none too impressed with the defenses of this base. Though of course the folks that lived here appeared to be a lot more deadly with some very heavy weaponry, and of course some extremely durable armor as well. Armor that I hope to pry off of them after murdering them. I don't think we'll have much issue killing them all, as it seems they can't even come together long enough to fight us away from fighting each other. Though it must be said that not all of the mercenaries were bloodthirsty fools with no sense of strategy. Some of them were much more calculated and even brutal. I take it he must be the leader of this chapter. Well, spooky names aren't going to scare us away so easily. Let's give him a little knock on the door, shall we? We had fired at the southern side of their base to try to draw them out into this field here, making it much easier to hit them with our cannons and to run them over as well. Truth be told, they do have quite the range advantage on us and their weapons are much more advanced, so if we didn't close the distance and start running many of them over, we probably wouldn't be able to win any fight. However, the unfortunate part is doing this also opens us up to their leader here and his massive plasma swords. We were trying to do the best that we could, but the mercenaries were quick on their feet, and the more damage that our tanks sustained from the plasma weapons, the slower they became. The clock was ticking, and we needed to end this fast. I would try to use several of our tanks to concentrate on one area of the mercenaries so that we may be able to kill them and force them to retreat. Eventually, this did end up working. I didn't want the brutal to get away from us though, and we had managed to hit him with a massive cannonball right in the back of the head. Many of his companions attempting to flee the area wouldn't be long for this world either and would be joining him in the afterlife shortly thereafter. We had killed a lot of them though instead of incapacitating them, which was a shame because that means we don't get near as much armor. Laz and Per both had quite a close call as their tank was destroyed by fleeing enemies. I knew that this was a possibility as it had been immobilized during the battle, but I didn't expect it to explode so soon. Thankfully though, Laz was in the gunner's seat as I knew he wouldn't take near as much damage there. Even so though, the 4 remaining tanks that we had that weren't destroyed had sustained extreme damage during the battle and would definitely need to be repaired before we even thought about going anywhere. Because of the extensive damage and the fact that the enemies would have reinforcements showing up in a few days, we would waste absolutely no time going ahead and starting repairs on all of our tanks. While that's going on, we could also check out some of the new weapons and armor that we got from the Mercenary, such as the leader's massive plasma swords. Something tells me we don't have the training or the power armor required to wield those though. Perhaps we'll obtain that type of armor in the future though, or if not, we could always sell them, but we definitely need to get them inside out of the elements before they deteriorate away. As we were focused on that, our samurai were having a little bit of an issue with the Mercenary's defenses, you know, the ones that I was criticizing earlier. Well, they ended up giving us a good run for our money, but eventually we did take out all the turrets. And now we can finally rest without the constant fear of death hanging over our heads, and believe you me, we needed to rest, as many of our samurai were completely exhausted. We went through the rest of the base just to ensure no one was hiding in the corner, waiting for us to step in so they could shoot us in the back of the head, and everything seemed to be good. With that being the case, as everyone is making their preparations for us to be able to go back home, I decided this would probably be a decent time to go ahead and name some of our fine folks. First up, we have Therak and Ne, who are going to be renamed as Senju and Hakuo. In particular, these wonderful names were provided by you wonderful people, in particular Rocker 666 006 once more, as well as Epping Cell, with the name Hakuo being based on a sumo wrestler who had actually reached the highest rank, and Senju being a mix of the words war and gun in Japanese. Now, for Therak, it was supposed to be Kana Senju, but I couldn't get a good translation on Kana with Google Translate. Unfortunately, that's all I really have at my fingertips, so I ended up just going with Senju, as it seems like a pretty decent translation of the two words. Which I think is also fine, because I most likely would have just said Senju for short anyhow. I decided that we should also go ahead and name our tanks, with our first one being named Kira, as well as the second one being named the Dreadnought. These splendid names were provided by our good friends Rins Brian Cardenaz, as well as Firefox 7658, with Kira being the word for death, but based on my research online, it actually appears to be the translation for the word killer. Either way, I'm super cool with that, and Dreadnought, although it doesn't say here in the comment, I believe is actually a reference to the Dreadnoughts from Warhammer 40k. Absolutely wonderful name suggestions, my friends. I want to thank you all ever so much for them as well. Now, after some time, we have finally managed to get all of our tanks repaired, as well as all of our people loaded up into them. Luckily, each tank actually has a passenger spot along with the gunner spot, so we had just enough room. We would finally arrive home, and now comes the difficult part, trying to haul all of the things that we have looted from our raid back into our storage room. A tedious process, no doubt, that will take quite a while. However, we did end up needing some more storage because of all the items that we actually collected from the raid, and thus we would end up building onto our current storage facility. Simply building some additional shelves, of course, but unfortunately this was interrupted. It would seem that we have a gigantic man-hunting pack of Megasloths coming to try and eat the flesh from our bones. A bit strange since they're herbivores, but okay. Now, I will say I was a bit perplexed on how we should actually handle this issue, and I had actually saved the game and closed it and went and had some dinner and done some other chores and things like that, and during that time I was pondering in my head, how can I beat this gigantic pack? Is this the end? Well, no, as it would turn out that running them over with our tanks, as we've handled many of our enemies thus far, is quite sufficient, even more so. Though doing these ramming maneuvers would actually cause quite a bit of damage to our tanks. As you can see, one of them here is leaking fuel, which is just water, of course. Of course, there are some tanks that are specifically built for this purpose of ramming our enemies, so maybe we should try to focus on some of those in the future. With the manhunting pack of Megasloths finally taken care of, we could finish up our additional storage to our storage room. Now, by this point, we had collected many a Neo-Samurai weapon from the Space Mercenaries with our recent raid. Even though we didn't get all that much armor, we did get many ranged weapons like rifles and bows and things of that sort. And I went ahead and had everyone equip some of those weapons. That way we have the most up-to-date, futuristic, and most powerful, most of all, weapons that we could possible. Now, I realize that these aren't exactly steampunk weapons or anything close to that, but I think they really still fit our aesthetic pretty good, and to be honest with you, none of the factions on the planet sell or carry steampunk weapons really, so we would have to craft them ourselves, which would be incredibly difficult, and we would definitely die before that happened. Speaking of weapons though, it would seem that we have a very large mech cluster that has dropped nearby our base, and their weapon of choice is a toxic smog thing that they're gonna basically poison the air with, which is no bueno. And thus we'll need to take immediate action. Now realistically, the toxic spewer isn't going to be online for a few more days, but I find it best to attack preemptively. Besides, it's more fun this way. Firing our tank cannon at the spewer woke up many of the mechs who were very pissed off at us, which just so happened to draw them in closer, which just so happened to be exactly what we wanted, yeah. Now our Emperor's Wrath tanks are the most powerful and the ones with the most health that we currently have access to. Now they don't exactly specialize in ramming enemies, especially not mechanoids with their steel plating that they're made of, but they should be able to hold up under the pressure. And while the majority of the mechanoid forces are distracted by the tank, this would give our samurai an ample opportunity to pick off any stragglers. Luckily none of them were killed or mangled all that bad, except for Jiraiya, who just so happened to take a scyther blade straight to the dome. He ended up losing his right ear and his right eye, so he is now in the One Eye Club with Laz. Because of Jiraiya's injuries, I would send him and the others back home and bring down Phoebe with the Doomsday rocket launcher just in case. I would also send the Dreadnought Emperor's Wrath tank back and bring down Kira and Matsumara to finish off the remaining mech defenses before we would finally take out the toxic spewer itself. And with that, my friends, the mech cluster was no more. As a celebration of sorts, everyone decided to play a good bit of mahjong together in the recreation building. This, on top of the mood boost we already got from destroying a mech cluster, made everyone pretty darn happy. And I must say, I myself was pretty happy as well, as we had plenty of components, plasteel, and normal steel from the remnants of the mech cluster itself, which was absolutely divine, as we were going to be using some of those resources on a brand new production area, in this case an automaton construction table. Meaning, of course, that we'll be able to create our very own type of mechanoids. In a sense, they are a steampunk and or clockwork type of mech. For our very first, I decided to create a clockwork spider. This little mechanical marvel, as you might have guessed, is a large mechanical spider, but it also has a large clockwork turret built in as well, acting as a mobilized turret. Now, I could be missing something here, but it doesn't seem like the spider itself or these wind-up clockwork mechs can actually be assigned to an overseer. I know I don't currently have anyone that can actually be assigned any mechs or anything like that, as none of them have the chip in their brain or whatever, but even using dev mode, not to cheat, but just to check it out, it doesn't seem like that's a possibility. It does roam around the village on its own though, making it something like a sentry bot, so that's pretty cool. Now, I will say I love our village, but it could use a little bit of sprucing up around the place, if you know what I'm saying, so I decided to do a little bit of research into cherry blossom tree sowing. Now, I know we got the big cherry blossom tree for our shrine, but it is a shrine, and that's why we're able to build that one, so we need the research. I had a good bit of resources left over that I had planned on using for more clockwork spiders, but then once I realized that we don't currently have a way to control them, and there may not be a way, I decided to utilize those resources instead on some clockwork turrets that are closer inside the village where everyone's residential housing is. This way, if we have any enemies like the space mercenaries dropping in drop pods in the center of town, we'll at least be a little bit ready for them. By the time our turrets were finished, we had also finished up our research into cherry blossom tree sowing. And we could place as many of these beauties all around town as we liked, the hope being that these little beauties will help us combat the ugliness of our clockwork turrets as well as our steam pipes that are right out in the open. I'm also going to have Per begin working on some new steam tank parts, as I'd like to replace the one that we had lost. During which time I also began planting plenty more cherry blossom trees all throughout the entire village. Which was all well and good, but I also had some construction projects in mind. In particular, I wanted to build an alchemy bench and an alchemy production area. For now, it's quite small and just barely out of the way of our wind turbines, but if we need to, we can always expand on another side of the village later on. Alchemy seems to be quite an offshoot from steampunk culture, but it is going hand in hand with it, so I decided that we might try and make some of these items here. To begin, I wanted to make a jar of essence of fire. Now, the item description didn't really explain what this was, so I thought it might be some type of potion or something, so I decided to let Laz try it out. But I noticed he dropped his bow for it, and it seems to actually be some some type of firebomb, which even given that we have a lot of ancient charge weapons that are pretty great, firebombs would very much come in handy. And because of that, I decided to make many more for many more of our samurai. I also decided to use some of our ink berries to try and make some essence of ink jars as well, just to give them a try out. Interestingly enough, the ink jars actually seem to be more akin to something like a grenade or something like that, though they actually also make a very large pile of ink on the ground, and using the flame essence together with them seems to create something of a burning tar effect, even if only for a short period of time. Mighty useful indeed, I'll say. We had also finally created enough parts to replace the altered comrade tank that we had lost when we raided the space mercenaries earlier. And in tribute of our first tank, we would also end up naming this one Yasukichi Mark II. Glad to have you back, old boy. But after some time had passed, I realized we were facing a bit of a problem around the village. Overpopulation, it would seem. Well, not really. We barely have that many people, but it does seem that we don't have enough housing for all of our samurai, so we would go ahead and work on some new residential housing for them. With the proper road systems and some culturally appropriate bedding, decorations, as well as even doors. And I really like these doors, so I decided to go ahead and start replacing them all throughout the village. And yes, indeed, I do think that they suit all of our buildings much better. But my friends, I want to thank you ever so much for watching today's episode. If you would like, be sure to leave any suggestions as well as name suggestions in the comments section down below, and I'll try to get to those as soon as possible. I also just wanted to mention that this episode is coming out a little bit late in this week, unfortunately. My power's been off for a few days. We were affected a little bit by the hurricane, but we're all completely fine here, thank God. Yeah, if you guys are affected, if you're on the East Coast, I hope you guys are alright. I hope everyone's safe and sound. I love you guys, man. Yeah, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I hope to see you in the next one as well. Goodbye, guys.